Thank you for all coming. And especially to the star of the show, Kerwin, joining us.
It's been a long time coming, hasn't
I
it?
know. We, for those of you who don't know, Kerwin's a very difficult man to tie down. I've done a bunch of his events and I finally thought, oh, get him on one of ours. And he's always so busy travelling and speaking and touring and impossible to book in. So we finally managed to get a date, locked him in, sold tickets, everyone was stoked. And then you go and had a bloody stroke on us.
I know, fuck. Fucking rude.
Very inconsiderate.
Yeah.
Like, come on, mate, you can still
Gary's
come
like, you're not fucking dead, come on.
We sold tickets, like...
He's not kidding.
Harden up, mate. Bit of
I'm doing my best.
Event. Yeah.
I'm doing my
So
best.
Anyway, that was about, how long ago was that?
That was end of 2021.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lots happened.
Yeah.
It's been a big time.
So, I mean, when I did this, of course, you know, people just rush to, oh, life's trying to get you to slow down, left leg, feminine side, you know, it's
Knee moving forward.
Me moving
Flexibility.
forward, inability to move forward with your ideas. I'm like, no, it was just a maneuver in the surf.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
I think
freaking fell.
I think it was Freud who said sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So why I bring that up is I'm wondering, with what you went through, was it, you know, which side, you know, was there deeper meaning? Obviously, you said you're a different person now from it.
It's a good question, because that was my second stroke. My first stroke was in 2009, and from the moment I had the first stroke, even until this day, there was not one bad aspect. I had a beautiful near-death experience, which can only be categorised as one of the most incredible experiences of my life. And so there was no, I guess what you call experiential deficit. There was a deficit in memory and speech for a short period of time, but because of the significance of the near-death experience, it didn't register as a deficit at the time, and everything eventually came back. Whereas this one was a little bit different. This one was about 4 times the size. It was in the same region of the brain. And the stroke itself wasn't so bad, but then there was a bit of circumstance around the stroke that was quite stressful. But then I had heart surgery about 6 weeks later, and then I was on immune suppressants because they'd put a little device in my heart because there's a hole in my heart. And while I was on immune suppressants, I just caught a really bad version of COVID. And it caused such a degree of inflammation in my heart and in my brain that it caused a secondary brain injury that was worse than the first 2 strokes combined.
Oh, my God.
And so for about 9 months, I won't say I was a vegetable, but I was pretty close to, I could do basic hygiene. I could make basic meals, basically reheat is essentially what I'm saying. But for the most part, I had almost no executive function. I had no short-term memory. I had no working memory. I became severely depressed, and I've never been, you know, we've known each other for almost 20 years. I've never had a day of depression in my life, but I was severely depressed for, I think it was a solid 9 or 10 months. But the most traumatic part of that experience was I became incredibly suicidal and never had end-of-life thoughts in my entire life. And to have that thrust upon me was just so traumatizing. And at the time, and I'm getting around to answering your question, there was all this, there's got to be some fucking meaning in this because this is so dark. And, you know, some people talk about the dark night of the soul. I feel like I had 365 of them, like back to back. And in the worst of it, I couldn't see any light. All I could see was darkness, and there was a lot of darkness. But as I started to emerge and as I started to integrate, you know, I often think it's like when we do, you know, any form of medicine, especially, you know, nature's medicines, the value's in the integration, it's not in the experience, because the experience can be light, it can be dark, it can be a whole range of things, but the value doesn't necessarily come from the experience, it comes from how we integrate that experience afterwards, which is where I think so many people really fall short on that journey. And so for me, during the integration process, things started to fall into place, you know, things started to shift. I started to feel myself shift. I felt changes within myself. And I went from being quite I've always been quite ambitious. I've always been quite hardy and quite resilient, but I started to soften and that was different. That was new. And I had to learn a whole new set of skills, because the first set of skills I've spent the last 48 years acquiring were skills around psychology and mindset and performance. And, I've had such great opportunity. I've trained with the Ukrainian Special Forces. I've trained with the US Special Forces. I've trained with the Australian Special Forces. And not many people get to do that for shits and giggles. But I got to do that because not only was I interested in performance, I was interested in the application of performance in really high stress situations. Because I think there's a lot to be said for understanding how a psychology works and how a psychology can be applied in really tough, difficult situations. Because anyone can learn basic psychology or basic personal development when it's 28 degrees and there's a nice 15-knot southerly. But personal development and what we know about psychology, it honestly doesn't mean shit until we're in the middle of a really rough storm and we're being knocked about. And what was so humbling for me is I thought I had a pretty good toolbox. But then I found myself in the middle of this storm and not one tool that I had in my toolbox worked. Nothing worked. And it was just like, fuck me. It's like building houses, and then all of a sudden you're asked to build a house and you go to your toolbox and you pull out all your tools, and the hammer becomes a saw, the saw becomes a hammer, and nothing does what it's supposed to. And so that's when I, again, wrapping up on your question, I had to find a new set of tools. Instead of learning how to use my mind to overcome adversity, I started to learn how to use my body to move through, integrate, and overcome adversity. And that just has led to the most spectacular series of events, more so probably in the last 6 months. But it was a pretty interesting time.
Can you talk us through what some of those tools were, the physical tools you're talking about?
A lot of it, to keep it as simple as I can, was really around embodiment. But understand, because I think, embodiment is like personal development. Everyone talks about it, but not that many people, from my experience as I've learned, really understand what I would call the elements or the truth of the practice of embodiment. Because most people think personal development is reading a book or going to a seminar. But, it's in the integration of the book, it's in the integration of the seminar, that's the development. And so, for me, it was the integration of so many concepts I think I knew, or I thought I knew, around feeling things, but then the application of the integration of actually learning how to feel those things. Because what was interesting is the part of my brain that was affected was actually the part of my brain that is responsible for emotional regulation and suppression. And when I look at what I've become, I guess you could say, almost an expert in over the last 30, 40 years, it was in the area of mastering a psychology in high stress situations in order to maintain function and process to be able to do. But in order to do that, I came up with all of these strategies around emotional regulation. But what I realized, what I'd done in reflection, is I'd come up with all these strategies around emotional suppression. And I think there's a time for suppression. Like if you're in the midst of a battle and you've got people dying all around you and you have to maintain function, that is an appropriate time to suppress emotions that are coming up. You can't sit there, if you're in a situation like that and go, I just got to feel my feelings. Hang on, everybody. Just hang on, stop firing, just stop shooting at me, let me just feel for a minute. In those moments, you have to suppress what's coming up, and you have to maintain composure, and you have to be able to maintain process and function of body and mind in order to complete the mission or the objective or whatever it is. But I think oftentimes what I took away from that is I started to take those applications and I was just applying it to things that just didn't feel good. And so if I had an emotion that came up that didn't feel good, then I had a process to feel good. And I think that's also a misnomer in personal development. We're taught how to anchor good feelings. So when we feel bad, just fucking make a move to feel good again. It's just so destructive. I learned from my experience that felt so destructive because it's not allowing emotions to essentially give us what they're designed to give us, which is access to feeling. And even just understanding the nature of emotion from a scientific and a biochemical perspective, my whole perspective on that has completely shifted. Embodiment, but the embodiment of felt senses, not desired senses. The embodiment of felt experiences, not desired experiences. And really learning how to integrate that into everyday life, not just the moments that you want to feel good. And I've got 5 minutes now, I can feel bad. No, it's not how it works. It's not how the body works. And when we suppress things over time, they talk about this invader. They talk about this in Chinese medicine. They talk about this in a lot of different ancient practices where when we have all these emotions that are built up in the body, they cause blockages. But what we're now only discovering, which is the irony of the situation, I've got a massive interest in a range of things, but right now I'm going down some big rabbit holes in quantum biology and quantum health, and actually looking at the quantum nature of molecular, cellular, and subcellular, submolecular, subatomic function. And what we're now discovering is, and this is not but this is at, I guess, classical biological, biochemical levels, is every emotion that we feel is a peptide. It originates in the brain from a little gland called the hypothalamus, and that's stimulated based on a referential index that our brains have to determine what things mean. And then the brain tells us how to feel. And those peptides come down through the pituitary gland into the bloodstream, connect with every single cell in the body, and then those cells behave differently. They either vibrate at a high rate of frequency or a lower rate of frequency, but those peptides are essentially metabolites. And so, imagine you've got this peptide that connects with a cell, and it's in the process of being metabolized, but you're not enjoying that frequency. And so you go, oh, Buck, stop chewing. I'm going to feed another set of peptides in there. And so we end up with these cells that are clogged up with all these unmetabolized peptides, which block the cell's capacity to respirate its environment, which blocks the cell's capacity to bring information in, bring information out, which essentially then blocks mitochondrial function below the cell, below the molecular level, to be able to function optimally using all the subatomic processes that essentially lead to, molecular and cellular function at a high level. And so it's been, my first stroke gave me, I guess you could say, a whole bunch of insights on quantum mechanics and particle physics as it related to reality and material reality and performance and psychology. And then round 2 stroke gave me the integration of the embodiment of reality, the embodiment of experience, the embodiment of self. But it was a nightmare experience.
So what was the key for you getting through it? It seemed like it wasn't really easy going.
No, it wasn't. No.
Like 8 months of depression, 9 months
of
depression?
Almost 10 months. And the funny thing was I did fucking everything. Through every tool, I did equine therapy, clay therapy, psychotherapy, water therapy, fucking every therapy. Like I basically went through all the different A to Z's of the different therapies. And there were 3 therapists that I sat down with at one stage differently, because I did this, it was like a 6-week outpatient recovery program, because I was so fucking bad. Like my team were like, mate, it was obvious I was in a really bad way. And the things that got me through, to round that up, is I carried a photo of my son Noah in my top pocket, and I looked at that photo, sometimes, 50, 60 times a day. And it just kept me anchored to this space. But I threw everything at it, and there were 3 therapists that I sat with in the worst of it. And I just kept on saying to everyone I met, I was like, am I going to get better? Because this is so fucked. Like, I hate what I'm feeling. I hate please tell me I'm going to get better. Because if you're going to tell me I'm not going to get better, I'm out. I'm done. I cannot. And I have such a greater level of compassion now for people who experience depression and suicidal ideation, and for people who take their lives. Because what I learned was, from my experiences, people don't take their lives because they're quitting. They take their lives because the pain is so physically and emotionally intense. There's no escaping it. You can't, and I was chronic insomniac at the time, so I couldn't escape, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, lost 17 kilos. And so I lived in this world of pain. And so I had these 3 therapists back to back. I was like, tell me I'm going to get better. Oh yeah, you're going to get better. You will get better over time. It will take time. It's going to be at least a 2-year journey to get better. I'm like, fuck, all right, 2 years, I can do that. But can I get better? Yeah. You guarantee me. I look me in the fucking eye. You guarantee me I'm going to get, well, you should get better. And then I asked the worst thing I could have asked, have you ever seen anyone this bad? And all 3 of them, without even hesitating, went, nope. And I was like, fuck. All right. But also, I think what helped was knowing myself. And you know me pretty well, where you even said this after the stroke, you don't do things by halves. And I just, my soul does not know how to do things slowly, and my soul does not know how to do things without a level of rapid succession and intensity. My soul just apparently loves to grow quickly. And so it goes, well, fuck, okay, there's a bit of growth that's required here. We could take the 20-year route, or we could take the 9-month route. Let's fucking take 9 months, because that's more efficient. And so yeah, what got me through it was, I think, just holding on to hope that I was going to get better. And then just looking at the photo of my son Noah every single day. And at the time I had a new baby as well. And that was surprisingly actually creating more trauma for me, because I had to leave a relationship because of the intensity of the chronic stress that was in that relationship. And the guilt that I felt around, leaving a newborn baby was just so intense, because I have such a high value on being a dad. And to do that, it was a lot. It was a lot to hold. But what got me through was just a vision of the future that wasn't real, but I just kept on focusing on it.
And without Noah, you probably wouldn't have
I wouldn't be
managed.
here. Yeah. Wouldn't be here.
Because a friend of mine, one of my dearest friends, he just took his life. He had three kids, wife. And
I heard. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And he does my work, teaches meditation. He was, in fact, one of my mentors. And people in the community was just shocked, like, how could he do that? And so thank you for your insight.
Well, mate, I was at dinner with someone who was like, that came up, and someone's going, I can't believe he did that. How irresponsible. Surely he must have thought about, and I was just like, hang on a second. No, he wasn't thinking about that. And number two, he did that with the complete and utter belief that if he does this, he was going to better the world. Because that's what I actually thought. I actually believed that my son and the world would have been better off if I wasn't there. And that is such a irrational sense of meaning, but when you're in that space, that was the only meaning that made sense, which on reflection doesn't, but at the time it's inescapable. And so I have huge compassion for those who experience depression, huge compassion for those who contemplate, attempt, survive, the families. And it's not a selfish act, because oftentimes those people do it. I know for my intentions, I was doing it because I thought I was doing the right thing, because I was a burden, It was a lot.
Yeah. And also I want to just acknowledge, often when I'll interview someone, I'll sort of, before we start, I'm like, is anything off the menu that you don't want to discuss? And Kerwin goes, nothing. I'm like, you legend. And we know each other pretty well, so I got all the skinny on him, He's got it on me. I'm glad I'm not being interviewed.
You're glad the shoe's not on the other foot, aren't you?
Yeah. But one thing I've noticed that you're very good at, and which I really applaud you, is being vulnerable as a man. And it's not something we really see enough of in our culture, I don't think. Women, Brené Brown's been pioneering that. But I think men really struggle with it. So what have you learned about vulnerability and your ability to be vulnerability and encouraging others? Like, what is the benefit of it?
My perspective on vulnerability has changed a lot. And I don't think it's because there was an absence of vulnerability before this experience. I think there was a lot. I've always been very open. Even my 100th jump when I was a skydiver, I skydived naked. So if I can skydive naked, I can live, pretty raw. Because it's pretty cold up there, let me tell you.
Good excuse, mate.
But I think my vulnerability initially was born from a total lack of boundaries.
Okay.
Which is ironic, because I don't think I've spoken this out loud before. I've had the awareness, but I don't think I've discussed it, where I didn't grow up in an environment that had a lot of boundaries. And so there was a constant invasion of privacy. And so as a result, when you grow up in an environment like that, where you perhaps have a significantly, or a parent that behaves in a narcissistic way, and they're constantly invading your boundaries and nothing is private, you kind of get used to sharing lots of stuff. And so I think for me, I've always been good at just sharing everything, because it was almost expected of my environment. But as I've grown, and this experience has taught me, I'm still just as vulnerable as I've always been, but now there are certain things I don't share, because I now have boundaries that I didn't have before.
You're more selective, perhaps?
More selective, more respectful as well. Because I've been through, some pretty heavy situations, a marriage breakdown, although it wasn't that heavy, a relationship breakdown just after having a new baby, which was pretty fucking heavy considering the circumstances. And so, I've developed to have a lot more respect for myself, and a lot more respect for those who, come and go and stay in my life. And so it's not that I don't share my emotions openly, but there's just certain details that, although maybe are not off limits in certain conversations, I'm just more selective, I guess you could say. Boundaries is the best word I can put on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what has become of your work now based on, do you notice that the work that you do with people is obviously really reflective of your journey, your process,
Always.
and all the knowledge? Yeah.
So it seems to me at the moment I'm attracting a lot of clients that need to embody stuff. And it's the irony is also very thick in the clients that I have existing that went through this period with me. They're all going through the process now of moving from, understanding and having very strong understanding of psychological tools. Because the irony is, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counsellor. I'm a business fucking coach, And for me, I remember 20-something years ago, I sat down and I kind of made the decision, okay, which direction I want to go. I'd made a bit of money. And I was like, okay, I can maybe become a personal development speaker, or I can do what I really also equally love, which is business. Because I got into business because I started studying psychology and personal development, because I wanted to become better. And so by virtue of doing that, I ended up, I guess you could say, becoming a consultant, management consultant, business consultant, and then a business coach. But I never let go of the psychological concepts, the performance concepts, the spiritual because I grew up in a very spiritual environment. My dad was one of the leading economists in the world, and my mum was a clairvoyant and a psychic. So it's like, ta-da. And so I'm someone who is incredibly open and incredibly curious and open to all sorts of concepts and ideas. But I'm also hyper data driven, wouldn't say critical. I just need to, like, you tell me that works, I want to know why. Why does it work? And so for me, I never lost. The reason I chose the business path versus the personal development path is because I thought the personal development path lacked a lot of credibility. And I wanted to actually demonstrate the application of the personal development stuff in real life to produce a result that made me feel like I could then teach the personal development stuff. But I never separated the two. I kept them really closely entwined. And so one of the things that makes me very different, because I'm not a normal business coach by any stretch of the imagination, and I've got a group of clients, we call them K2 Elite, and just in the last 8 years, we've generated over $1 billion of additional revenue just with those clients. But what's astounding is not that we've generated over $1 billion for those clients. What's astounding is how many relationships that I've saved with my clients, how many lives I've saved with my clients, and I'm talking based on suicide and based on health issues, and how many families I've brought back together. And so nothing I do is in isolation of my mission, and my purpose is to help people. It's been very apparent for some time. And so to wrap that into the answer more succinctly of your question.
Please don't be succinct, just go for it.
I'm always a bit of I like the adventure of different trails. I've never not taught the principles of life when I teach the principles of business. If anything, I always lead with the principles of life before I teach the principles of business, because I'm of a very strong belief that I've observed this in my own work, where I can teach two people the same information. One will go and make tens of millions of dollars, and the other one will fuck it up 52 ways to Friday and blame me. And so I've done this for long enough now to know that I know what I do works. I don't need anyone to tell me. I just need to find the right people, and the right people are the ones who are open, teachable, coachable, accountable, willing. And so for me, when I work with clients like that, nothing's off limits. Like we talk, because if you can't get your relationship at home together, how do you expect to navigate relationships in a business space? And how do you expect to be supported in the home environment if you don't actually have a relationship that supports you to be able to go and conquer the world? And how do you expect to be able to have the energy that's required to build an incredibly successful enterprise if you have no energy because you drink fucking Coke and eat hamburgers? And how do you essentially tie in the fact that you're trying to build a movement greater than just making money? So how do you do that if you're not connected to something yourself that is greater than just making money? And so for me, I've never been good at separating business and life. Like to me, it's all in. And so for my clients, I always seem to attract clients who are going through the same stuff I am. Yeah. Which you probably relate to as well.
It's ridiculous.
And
It's so stupid. Like,
So it's almost like I've built this bank of clients who have all built up all this emotional suppression.
yeah,
And are now like, oh, finally, we can go down this path and do this. And when I introduce, whatever I'm going through, because I always talk about with my clients what I'm going through, they're always like, I don't know how you do it, but you just seem to know exactly what I'm going through. And it's just like,
I was there last week. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny how that works.
It is.
What do you put that down to?
Oh, look, quantum entanglement would be the scientific explanation for it. Attunement would be more of a classical explanation to it. We seem to attract people who are on a similar vibration to ourselves. Serendipity would be a philosophical way of explaining it.
What's your understanding of how the mind impacts matter, reality, our life, the energy of life?
I think the mind is a intersection, or it's almost like the bridge between the quantum world and the classical world. And the quantum world is very unique, in which we've been told that it's completely unpredictable, but as we're discovering, the more we look at it, it's not unpredictable. It's just based on laws that aren't set. It's based on laws that are probable. Whereas in the classical world, we basically work in a world where the laws are set, and there are fundamental laws. But the reality that gives birth to the laws that are set aren't governed. And so it's almost like when you understand that world, the other world's laws don't count. They don't exist. But you need a conduit, you need a bridge to get you from, I guess you could say, from the classical world, which most of us function in, consciously, to the unconscious world, which is the quantum world. We need something to bridge those two together. And I believe the mind plays a role, but I believe the heart plays a bigger one. Because when we look at the science of the heart sends 16 times more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. The heart has an electromagnetic field that is about 4 to 5 times bigger than the brain. The heart has 100,000 times the electrical charge. It has 40 million to 40 trillion neurons. Most people have probably heard of heart transplant phenomena, whereby people get a heart transplant and they start remembering things that aren't theirs. They start waking up with addictions that weren't theirs. They change. The heart has its own central nervous system. The heart has this intelligence, but it's the only organ in the body that has sufficient electrical charge to be able to imprint information on that torus field that radiates around us. It creates that torus field, that electromagnetic field, the dominant one. And the mind essentially programs the heart to essentially communicate with the environment. And if you get into the physics of it, all matter, and we're talking about how mind affects matter, all matter is composed of local and non-local properties, local being atomic properties. So we're talking atoms, so electrons that are orbiting protons and neutrons that are held together by gluons. But all these atoms have to communicate in order to dance together. And so that chair is dancing right now. This floor is dancing right now, but it's dancing at a particular tune that so how do these atoms all know how to dance to the same tune? Because they talk to each other. And the way they talk to each other is through their electrons, and their electrons communicate using messenger particles, and the messenger particles are composed of light, photons. And what's interesting, and this is what I'm learning so much, and I'm so fascinated around quantum biology, is I'm just learning how much bigger the light story really is. And the Vedas have been talking about it, the yogis have been talking about it, the mystics have been talking about that we are beings, we are from light, we are light beings. And the more I learn about how our body operates, there's never been more truth in that statement, because when you look at it, I guess, the classical way, how we interact with matter, our body is constantly illuminating infrared light through the emission of biophotonic energy. So we're emitting biophotons. And those biophotons essentially have the capacity to communicate with matter. And there's only one organ in the body that has sufficient electrical charge to imprint information on those biophotons that are leaving the body, and that's the heart. The brain tells the heart what to imprint. The brain, essentially interprets the intuitions that it feels. And when you look at, even when you look at the word intuition, we look at the word tuition. What does tuition mean? Teaching. When we're in teaching, we're able to receive the knowledge of the ancients. And then when we look at the equal opposite of in teaching, intuition, we talk about intention. And tension is essentially the substance that causes wave functions to collapse to create matter. It's the process of decoherence, where a wave function, which is non-local in superposition, a level of tension is built up upon the region of where those wave functions exist, and then they go through a process of collapse, which is called decoherence, and they become localized energy. You know, the wave function duality, if you're curious, you know, Google the double slit experiment. But what's interesting is when we when we're in tension, we're releasing tension from the body. Mm-hmm. And that's where so many people don't realize the power, the creative power of emotions, of feelings, of energies, especially sexual energy as one. And that's talked about a lot, you know, in different tantric, Vedic cultures, you know, Eastern, Western. I talk about it in Qigong. Qigong is the process of where they essentially build up heat, and they are expressing heat in most cases through their hands. And when you look at a Qigong master's hand and you put it under or you measure the temperature of their hands, they're emitting enormous photonic energy, huge levels of photonic energy, which when directed with an intention has enormous healing capacity. And so the mind is, I believe, is a tool of the soul to direct its focus. It's like a magnifying glass for the soul to amplify the things that it wants to do. Mm-hmm. And when you look at a magnifying glass, and I don't know if anyone did these experiments when they're at school, but I remember in year 2 or year 3, we got given a whole bunch of these little plastic magnifying glasses, and we're told to take them out onto the oval on a sunny day with a piece of wood. And we were told, you know, okay, you want to focus on it, and you want to burn. You know, and some kids were off burning fucking ants, and I'm sitting there, ADHD, dyslexic. You know, I'm being given pretty much every acronym there is in neurodiversity, and I'm sitting there going like this: it's not working, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working. And then my teacher would come up and grab my hand, and then he'd go like this, and he'd go, Kerwin, you've just got to hold still and focus on the one thing. Focus on the one spot. And then sure enough, it would go brown and then black and then there'd be smoke. And I'd be like, how the fuck did you do that? What did you do? What did you do? And I think that's how the mind works. The mind works as a magnification of where the intention is directed to expand the areas that it is being focused on. And you know, one of the things that I've learned is the things that we pay attention to expand. And when you look at even just the phrase pay attention, paying attention is the cost of entry to every creation that we want. The question is how long can you pay currency, attention, which is light, intention, light, to something to create that level of tension in the environment before it collapses, and then you have this manifestation of material form. And so, yeah, I think the mind plays an incredible role, but most people don't have, I think, discipline of mind to be able to direct it. Most people don't have the discipline of mind to be able to interpret what's coming from the heart. Because even when you look at the word heart, if you take, if you rearrange the letters in heart, it's earth. But also when you look at, if you take the T off the end of heart, you've got here. And if you look at the core of the word heart is ear. And throughout the ages, we've been told, listen to your heart, trust your heart, listen to your heart. And the heart sends, we now know based on, you know, neurocardiology, the heart sends 16 times more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. It's in constant communication with the brain, but most people's brains are so fucking noisy, they can't hear what the heart is saying. And it's almost like having a better version than Siri, like a soul Siri, a cellular Siri, you know, in your pocket, and it's constantly whispering to you the secrets of the universe, but you're sitting in the mosh pit of a U2 concert, and you can't hear what the fuck it's saying. And that's where I'm so grateful for our work together, because, you know, our work was really building upon the foundations of meditation that I've done, but it took it to a whole nother level of learning how to just sit in silence to learning how to sit and quiet in silence versus just sit in silence.
Yeah. So for you, I'd love if you could share like the practical science or application of being more heart-centered. What does that look like? How does one achieve that?
I think that it brings us back to the embodiment story again, because one of the things that I'm learning is, you know, the heart's in constant communication. We've got this beautiful big neural superhighway that sits up the center of our body that goes from the base of our spine through our stomach to the heart up to, you know, the base of the brain. And it's constantly in communication, but the heart has this unique ability to tell all the other organs what to do. And so I think you answered the question, like, how do we become heart-centered? We become heart-focused. Like, we realize that it is the center. And, you know, not only do we have the neural tissue in the heart, we've got neural tissue in the gut, we've got neural tissue in our skin, we've got neuroectodermal tissue, you know, through so much of our body. So we've got this enormous capacity to physically remember, but also to physically feel what is being essentially transmitted in all directions from the heart. So how do we become heart-centered? We become embodied. We become able to develop the capacity to feel. And feeling doesn't always feel good. Because if I get back to the story, and Candace Pert was, I guess you could say, the one who really helped me here. She wrote the book Molecules of Emotion. You know, when we've got all these cells that are essentially built up with all these, clogged up with all these peptides of emotions that are unfelt, at some point we have to feel those. And when I had my stroke, basically my throttle was fucking destroyed. And so I had a period of, let's call it 3, 4, 5 months where I just felt a lot and I couldn't stop feeling. And again, when I look at how my soul likes to do things, my soul likes to do things efficiently and quickly and intensely. It may have taken me, in another version of my life, another 20 years to feel all those emotions, to get to a point where there was space. Because I think oftentimes we don't give ourselves enough feeling to achieve space, because we're constantly in feel, and so we don't achieve this point where there's an absence of feeling, which is what I used to pursue. I called it neutral. Neutral was and I used to say, emotions are chaotic, emotions are destructive, and I had a very little understanding of the intelligence of emotions back then. But now I understand the intelligence of the emotions more. Still got a long way to go. But when we can essentially learn how to feel from our center, from the solar center, and we can understand that emotions themselves, when we feel, produce tension. And that tension has the capacity to create matter if it's directed. So if we can feel and be feeling, but also hold a vision, we actually become like a supercapacitor for creation. But most people are too busy feeling and thinking about the bad things they're feeling about, so they create more of the bad things that they're feeling about to feel more of the things that they're feeling that are bad. But also understanding, based on Candace Pert's work, that all feelings are addictive. You know, the emotions, and this was, I guess you could say, the pinnacle of Pert's work, where she identified that the neural peptides that took up the receptors that we have in our cells that are responsible for receiving the peptides for emotions are the same receptor shape for the peptides that those cells receive from narcotics, barbiturates, nicotine, alcohol, and cocaine. And so when we talk about, you know, those substances, which I'll classify for this conversation as drugs, we talk about them as addictive substances. But we don't often refer to emotions as addictive substances. But what we know about cells is they're evolutionary in their behavior. And so they're constantly in a state of evolution where they split and divide. But the cells split and divide to evolve to their environment to ensure that they get the most optimal opportunity to feed. And peptides are proteins. It's food. And so if you're constantly feeling sad, those cells are going to split and divide. And as a process of evolution, they're going to evolve to have more receptors for sadness than they are for happiness. And as a result, you're going to develop an emotional addiction of sorts that you're completely unaware of, because you just don't understand. I just feel sad all the time. Whereas not knowing that you've actually developed an emotional addiction based on essentially a very small set of evolutionary processes that are happening within our body. And oftentimes when we look at the effects of emotions and we compare them to drugs or alcohol, because has anyone here ever been drunk before?
This is Soma. No one's done any of that stuff.
Is anyone drunk right now?
Yeah, about half the room.
But has anyone ever done anything, like, I don't know, but I can relate. I'm not a big drinker, but I've done a lot of stupid things under the influence of alcohol and drugs in my life, only to sober up and then go, fuck, that was probably not a good idea. But then we don't often realise how many times have we done something stupid while we're really excited, and then as soon as we calm down, we're like, oh, fuck, I probably shouldn't have done that. Or really angry, and then we say or do something, but then we calm down and go, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. Really sad, done or said something, we calm down, we go, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. The representation of the experience is so clear, but most people don't make the connection. And I think when we can learn how to, and this is the confronting thing, I think for most people, and again, we're still talking about the feeling aspect of embodiment. Most people are so addicted to their situation, they don't know that they're actually in a situation that is addictive. Because they just spend most of their life... Because when you're drunk, it's like, has anyone got that friend that when they're drunk, you go, I think you've had... I'm not drunk! So you're fucking... No, I'm not! You're drunk! Most people, when they have an addiction that is below awareness, they're unaware that they're addicted to something. They're unaware that they've got a substance issue. Most people are unaware that they've got emotional addictions because they're so used to feeling that way that they don't know what it feels like to have the absence of that. They don't know what it feels like to be sober. So how would you know that you have an addiction to something if you've never experienced sobriety? And the process to get to a point of sobriety requires, you know, in some cases, depending on your life and traumas and experience, it requires a lot of feeling.
Pain's a great teacher, it seems.
Oh,
one of the best.
What did Buddha say? Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. I think that was what he said.
Yeah. Have your greatest lessons come from pain?
Unfortunately,
heartbreak, turmoil.
I have a great teacher. He's become a good mate. His name's Dr. John DiMartini. I've got a lot of time for John. He's a bit of a quack. But I remember one time we were having this conversation about the greatest level of growth happens at the border of chaos and order. And I was sharing with him my life stories, and most of my life has been, I guess you could say, it started with an intense level of chaos that slowly petered out to a level of imbalanced switching between chaos and order. And understanding the dualistic nature of life, I hadn't worked this out yet because I was under this false belief and a false addiction that in order to grow, and this is so dangerous because I'm going to assume most people in this room are here because they want to grow. But when we listen to philosophy or we listen to statements like, in order to grow, you have to experience pain, and pain is great. And I'm not saying that's not true, but that's one side of a two-sided coin. And when we only believe, if we have a very high value on growth, but we choose to hold the belief dear that the only way to achieve maximum growth is to be in chaos, then lo and behold, we're going to attract and manifest an awful amount of chaos in our life in order to meet the values that we know are important to us. And I was having this conversation with John, and he's like, you do realize there's a whole other fucking side of the equation because growth is a spectrum, and we've got, let's call it negative input growth, and then you've got positive input growth. And I was like, what's this positive input growth? I don't understand. Does not compute. And he started to explain, and at first I was very resistant. I was still young and still quite arrogant. But then over time I started to go, you know what, it would be really nice to grow in peace.
Enjoy.
Well, it'd be nice to grow on a 28-degree day when there's, 15 knot winds and you've got dolphins off the side versus having to grow in a fucking torrential cyclone, which is what most of us, myself included, prior version of Kerwin, was of the belief that if you want to grow, then you have to experience turmoil. And I just am learning now that some of the most beautiful growth happens on a sunny day. And it's a great place to focus, to acquire growth in a world where there's just plenty of chaos. There's no shortage of chaos to grow from.
And on those sunny days, are you creating that or just enjoying the radiance?
Mate, right now I am enjoying the radiance. Yeah. I'm enjoying being alive more than I've ever enjoyed being alive in my entire life because it's like...
Why? What's...
Well, it's like money because I've had a lot of money and I've had no money.
What do you prefer?
Well, I prefer having money if I'm honest. But my relationship with money has changed. Look, I wear I'm wearing Ugg boots and a flannel. I've got like a $200 watch. I've got plenty of money, but I just use my money in different ways now. Before it was, and by before I mean like 10, 15 years ago, it was suits, it was cars, it was, fancy things, expensive watches. Whereas now it's experiences. It's and I don't want to say security for the sake of security, but it's like I'm now focused on multi-generational wealth creation. And you can't leave anything for the kids if you've spent it all. And it's interesting because I know some people who are hell-bent on leaving nothing for their kids. Whereas one of the things I really admire about some of the Asian and some of the Jewish cultures is how unified they are as teams to build multi-generational wealth. And so It was the money, and what was the other one? I'm going to tie it up. Having money, not having money. I was relating it to something. What was I relating it to?
I've got no idea.
Who can tell me?
Yeah. I'm drunk. I can't remember.
He's the drunk one. I was relating it to something. It'll come. It'll come. I have a photographic memory. Everything I see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and read to recall with crystal clear accuracy.
Yeah, so why do you enjoy life so much more now?
Why do I enjoy that's it, the money thing. Having money, not having money. Like when you are on the edge, like there were 2 moments in that 9-10 months where I was inches away from doing it. I didn't attempt, but I was so close. And so to be able to look back on those moments, it's incredibly humbling. The trauma is subsiding. But it's like, holy fucking shit, I'm so grateful I didn't do that. Like, I'm so grateful that I did not do that, because if I did, I wouldn't be experiencing this. I wouldn't be experiencing, the love, the light that I'm experiencing right now. And just also being alive in a time that is so fucking interesting. I think it's a saying from Confucius, or it's an old Chinese saying, may you live in interesting times. And I'm pretty sure we could all agree we hit the fucking jackpot. And so for me, there was a period in that darkness where this whole global situation that was going on was actually becoming part of the fuel to end. It was like, I don't want to be here for this. This is not the movie I signed up for. Mine had a happy ending. And then I was like, no, I want to be a part of the change. And the irony was, it was in November of 2019. I don't even know if I've told you this. I was in Santa Monica. I was over there filming some podcasts and doing some stuff. And I was sitting in a Mexican restaurant, and I was having a few sips of a margarita, and I was puffing on a vape, not the CBD kind. And I was mildly high, and then all of a sudden I just got smashed with a vision. And my videographer was with me, Matthias, who's like my best friend. And it was the one night in the last 4 years where he hadn't brought the camera to dinner. Because normally whenever he's there, I'm just being filmed constantly, which is another experience. And I just had this, and I just started crying and crying and crying, and the waiter's coming and going, and he's like, Matthias is just holding space, and I didn't even know he pulled out his little iPhone and he started filming while I was just crying and crying and crying. And then he said, are you okay? And I said, I now know what I need to do. And then I started crying and crying. And I'm pretty sure like the waiter thought we're like having a breakup or something. Because I'm just sitting here devastated. It's like my little toy boy's leaving me or something. And I still to this day haven't been able to talk about that vision. I've maybe shared small aspects I shared some of it with Matthias, because he's a very, very close friend. I've shared aspects with maybe 1 or 2 other people. But the gist of it was, and this is kind of hard to talk about in a way that I'll just share what feels comfortable. I basically got shown everything that was going to happen. And I got given a 400-year vision. Like I got given this is what's going to happen in the next 400 years, starting now. And I was like, fuck. And I came out of it and I spiraled, because I was like, I can't hold this. This is not mine. This was meant for somebody else. I think it was meant for table 42. I'm on table 38. It's not what I ordered.
How's the story end? What does it look like in 400 years?
It's very different. Yeah, that's a really, wow. No, there's only one other person that's asked me this, and the only thing I can say with a great level of certainty is it does get better. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, this is a guy who's got 5 brain injuries. I saw something whilst being a little bit high, so it could be nothing. And but then as soon as COVID came, I was like, oh my God, this was in the vision. And so, yeah, it was a lot to hold. But to answer that question, when there's the absence of light, when light comes, it's so much brighter. And I'm just so grateful for the light in my life right now.
And I can see the influence of your mum, her psychic abilities
in an
coming
interesting
along.
way. We've never been more distant, but she played her gifts played an incredible role.
Have you done much research into the intergenerational aspect?
So generational trauma?
Trauma and also gifts too.
Yeah, well, it turns out I come from a long line of crazy folk. And by crazy folk, I mean clairvoyants, psychics on my mum's side. So yeah, I do know a little bit about it, only through what was shared in family gatherings for a period. Because I don't have a big family. I've got a very dysfunctional family, like most people probably do. My family put the fun in dysfunctional. But at many of the gatherings, it was talked about how grandmother and great-grandmother and great-great-grandmother, you know, reading cards, tea leaves, rocks, runes, like it was something that was discussed. So I was actually taught how to read tea leaves. From my earliest memories were learning how to read tea leaves.
Is that something that is like coming alive in you more as you're going through your own evolution?
I think it's becoming more a part of me. It's not separate from me anymore, versus I don't look at it as there was a period of time where it became a party trick, because I suppressed it for a very long time, because I grew up with a mother going, "Oh my God, you've got the gift." But then all my mates going, "Your mum's a fucking weirdo." And I'm like, well, I don't want to be like my mum, so I'm just going to shove this shit that she says is the gift. I'm going to shove it right down tight, and I'll pack this right down. And then it came out at the most unsuspecting time. I just started my entrepreneurial journey. I'd flown to Thailand to do this 7-day training with one of my mentors, and he had just gone through his third divorce, and he was learning palmistry, but he was learning palmistry to pick up chicks. Right. And so he wanted to, on the way over in the plane, he wanted to practice on me. And through the process of, I'm a sponge. Like if I find something that's interesting, I just absorb knowledge, and I'm usually okay at it. And so I learned all the fundamentals of palmistry, and I was like, well, this is really fascinating. But I was in a relationship at the time, so I had no interest to use it for, malevolence or for ulterior motives. And so anyway, while I was in Thailand, I started playing with it. But then I got back, and my partner at the time, she was in fashion. She worked in a fashion agency in Brisbane. And I got invited to this fashion week party at this nightclub. And so anyway, she's busy being a fashion agent, and she's all taken up, and I'm at the bar, you know, sipping on a drink, and I strike up a conversation with this model. And then we start talking, and the next thing, she goes, I want to go and see a psychic. I can't even remember the words that she used. And I was like, I know, I can read palms. And so anyway, she gave me her palm, and I started reading her palm, and before I knew it, I wasn't just reading the lines, this stuff just started coming through, and I started telling her about her grandmother and when her grandmother passed and what her grandmother used to call her, and she's crying, and all this is going on. And then before I knew it, I had a line of like 15 models deep, all lining up. I'm in a relationship, so no capacity to act on anything ulterior. And then it became, because the woman I was dating at the time was quite a socialite, but then it became a party trick. So every party that we went to, I would have a line of sometimes 15, 30 people deep, just waiting to have their palm read. And by the end of it, I'd be like 10 o'clock at night, I'm ready to go home, this is fucked. And so after a while, it came back, and then it got pushed away again. And so now it's coming back, but it's not coming back as a parlor trick. It's coming back, I think, in a really... it comes back when I work with clients one-on-one, even if when I work with clients one-on-one in a room. Like I'll be talking to a client I'm fielding a question. Had an event last week in Sydney, and I was fielding a question, and she was talking about a trauma in her life, and I said, that was because of what happened 28 years ago. She goes, I'm not 28, I'm 51. I said, I know you're 51, I'm talking about what happened 28 years ago. She goes, what do you mean? I said, what happened 28 years ago? And then she just burst into tears. I had no idea where that came from, but it was pivotal to the interaction, the conversation that we're having. And so it's become, really a unique gift, which I don't think necessarily I'm special, although there are many tests that would suggest I am quite special. But I do believe it's one of those gifts that everybody has. And some people are genetically wired to have bigger muscles. Some people are genetically wired, doesn't mean that others can't build bigger muscles. Some people are genetically wired to have better cardiovascular capacities to run long distances. Doesn't mean you can't learn how to do that if you're not. I think everyone's got the capacity to do everything and anything. It's just some people maybe have a bit of an ancestral gift that comes with them, and I think I maybe have a little one.
And so what's your focus these days? Because if I look at the Kerwin that I originally met and watch your evolution over the years, it seemed to be a very different human being now, which is beautiful. So what is it that is calling you forward now? Because I think you used to be a very, very ambitious person.
Very.
I'm wondering, is the ambition still there, or is it
No.
more heart-based ambition now?
It's a different. Like I used to want my goal at one stage was to build $100 million business. And pre-COVID, I was a quarter of the way there. And, COVID took the wind out of my sails for a little bit, but we bounced back incredibly strong. But again, my intention is I don't want to build a $100 million business anymore. I just want to help people. And as a caveat, so I don't sound too altruistic, I want to have a good life. I want to be able to live. Because when you consider the absence of life through taking it, but then you consider the potential to be able to live. And by live, I mean, I haven't missed a sunrise in about 60 days. And I'm not sure if this is good information to hand out, but every morning I'm at Dolphins at the front of my house, standing in a very small pair of shorts, freezing my ass off, standing in the wet sand, just staring at the sun for the first 30, 40 minutes. So I'm doing my cold therapy, my sun therapy, my light therapy, all simultaneously, and then I come back and
grounding at the same time.
Grounding, yeah. I'm harvesting electrons from the sun. I'm harvesting electrons from the sand. I'm creating my own internal electrons from just from the light itself, based on Einstein's theory of the photoelectric effect, which he won the Nobel Prize for. And then I go home, and if I've got my son there, we hang out on the beach and we play. Then we go home, and he's either getting ready for school and I'm taking him to the bus, or I'm doing a coffee enema, or I'm doing more red light therapy, or I'm reading a book. I'm just living now, whereas before it would be, I'd get up, I'd have my cold shower, I'd race to get my son ready, I'd race to get his, race to make his breakfast, race to make his lunch, race to get into school, race to get to work, race to fucking meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, race to work out, and then race back to meetings, and then just constantly fucking move. Well, I think we've had this conversation, like constantly moving so fast, whereas now one of the things I've observed since the last stroke, I don't even talk that fast anymore compared to what I used to talk. Like I used to talk so fast. Whereas now I'm a lot more measured. I don't move so fast. My brain and I was saying this to you earlier, my brain works differently now. And it's taken me a few months to learn the new tools, I guess you could say, or get used to the new equipment. And at first I used to get really frustrated because I wasn't thinking as fast as what I used to think. I wasn't able to communicate as quickly as what I used to. But then after a while I was like, it's so much more relaxing talking at this speed. It's so much more, I can stay, it's a lot easier for me to stay in my body when I'm speaking and I still speak probably quicker than most, but it's just a lot more calm.
How's it feel in here?
Which, when you're saying here?
So really calm here, and then...
Well, interesting. That's a good dissection. I've never had more trouble than I am experiencing right now with my meditation, but I am still ruthless in my practice. I don't do things lightly. Like when I did Vipassana, I think I ended up doing it 7 times. And to me, it's the most... I say this with a level of humor, it's a very self-abusive meditation because it's so fucking hard. Like you're sitting there for 10 days in silence, stewing in your own shit, and it's fucking hard. Like it's really, really hard. And so when I came out of Vipassana, I think the reason I kept going back is it didn't stick. And I found it really hard to do my hour in the morning practice, hour in the evening practice. But I got so much from it from a philosophical perspective and also from just a practical perspective of, you do 11-day Vipassana, you come back, you're different, you're not the same. But then I heard about, am I allowed to say the words TM in here? I'd heard about TM before. Had been really ramped up as the billionaires meditation because so many more billionaires did TM than any other form of meditation. And then I became curious in TM, and so I started exploring TM and found that the roots in TM were actually Vedic meditation and that TM was actually just this brand. And then I got introduced to Gary through another good friend of mine, Matt Burke, who's been a good friend and also someone on my health team for a long time. And I started doing meditation with Gary. And all of a sudden it was like someone just hit the easy button because I only had to do 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. And I can do that. ADHD, dyslexic, OCD, like I've got it all. And so an hour was difficult, 20 minutes was easy. But then as I discovered, 20 minutes turned into 30 minutes and turned into 40 minutes. And now I can sit for like hours. I can sit. But Gary also helped me understand the different versions of meditation suit different contexts. Like Vipassana is very monastic. Is that the word?
Monastic, yeah.
Monastic. And Vipassana is the householder meditation, because the householder can't. VM.
You said Vipassana.
Oh, sorry. Then VM is the householder. And so I think the ease of the 20 minutes made it easy as an integration, and then it became like most forms of things that I do. I'm very progressive in everything I do. And so I like to just constantly be pushing. And I think initially I was pushing out of ego, just to learn how to meditate longer and longer and longer. And then it just happens. And I only started meditating in the mornings after about 2 years of waking up at 3 a.m. going, this is fucked, rolling over, trying to get back to sleep, going, this is fucked. And then for ages, I just kept on thinking, there's got to be something I could do right now, but I don't want to wake up and turn on a phone. Doesn't matter what time I go to bed. I am up at 3:30, like clockwork.
No wonder you're seeing the sun so much.
Hey? Well, mate, the sun doesn't rise for 3 hours after that. So I'm normally doing at least 2 hours of meditation every morning. But oftentimes my meditation consists of me sitting there fucking observing how fucking mental I am. Because my brain is just going, go to the body, go to the body, go to the body, go to the body. But I don't fucking move. Like I am like a fucking statue for, sometimes 1.5 to 2.5, sometimes 3 hours every morning. And it is, and I keep saying to myself, oh man, when I get to the other side of this, my meditation is going to be so good. Because it's like right now I'm in the grind of it,
Yeah.
Because my brain works differently. So there's calm in areas that there wasn't calm before. But, prior to this last stroke, man, my meditation was zen. My mind was still. And it's almost like, someone's just, it's like a Coke can and someone's shaking it up. And it's just slowly decompressing. But I'm okay. But the beautiful thing is, I feel like it's I'm actually okay with it. I'm not in resistance to it. I believe I have a very high degree of acceptance of it because I'm not stopping. I'm not using it because I can't tell you how many times, because I'm not a meditation teacher like Gary, but I preach meditation. And people say, but Kerwin, I tried to meditate. It doesn't work for me. Well, why? Well, I sit down and my mind's just so busy. It's so busy. And I'm like, are you aware that it's busy? And they're like, yes. So you catch yourself that you're busy. I'm like, yes. I'm like, well, that's fucking meditation, isn't it? But people use that as an excuse not to meditate because they think they're doing it wrong. And that's what I've learned with meditation. Meditation is the art of catching yourself being busy and then just going back to, a sensation, a mantra, a feeling. And that's, I think, where my meditation has shifted. And I think that's the gift of my busy mind in meditations right now. I've moved away from my Vedic meditation and I've gone back to my roots in Vipassana. And so I'm using a lot more sensory meditation, a lot more embodied meditation. And that oftentimes is involving me feeling things during my meditations and not using a mantra or diverting sensation to somewhere else not to feel what's coming up. So I believe that there's a higher purpose for it. And again, I just go with it. I've had 3 people say to me today, like, oh, are you excited about this talk? I'm like, it's interesting. I used to say this, but the meaning has changed. I don't actually get excited. And I used to not get excited, but I think because I was just so fucking jammed up with emotions that I didn't know how to feel. Whereas now, what am I looking forward to? I'm looking forward to sharing more of, I feel like I'm in 3.0 right now because I've gone through so many transitions. Because between the first stroke and the second stroke, I also had 2 pulmonary embolisms and a number of heart surgeries. And so I've had all these iterations of self and all these, divorce, marriage, first baby, then divorce, and then, second baby, and then second stroke, and all these things. And so in the process of integrating all these things, I really love to share, what I do, and by what I do, I mean what I've gone through, because for some reason, and it kind of relates to what we were saying before, I seem to attract people who have similar experiences. And
so you're the crash test dummy, mate.
I literally feel like I am a crash test dummy for a significant population of the world. And I'm okay
Hope
with
you
that.
survive it, yeah.
Well, I'm okay with that
next?
because, I get to see, I had a lady that came to one of my events in 2017, and she stood up and she goes, and the video became how kids spell time or how kids spell love. And I think it became like a 32 million view video. It was huge. And it started with this lady asking, I think I've done a lot of damage to my son, and I'd like to know how I can fix that. And so then I just shared with her some, I guess I'd call it experiential philosophy around life and parenting. And then she came to this event that we had like 3 days ago in Sydney, and she had her now 19-year-old son with her, who stood up and shared how their life had completely changed as a result of that conversation. And so I feel very blessed that, I honestly believe, and this was part of the vision that I will share, I'm of the belief that most of the impact that I have will be long after I'm gone. But while I'm here, when I get to see it, it's really nice. And I think that's also the gift of parenting. I think, because a lot of people look at the current state of the world and they go, oh my God, the fucking generation this, the generation that, the millennials, the Gen Zs, the fucking whoever, the baby boomers are entitled, the Generation Zs are fucking entitled, everyone's fucking lazy. And it's just like, you know what? Every generation is nothing more than an expression of a mass, broad cultural parenting defect. And there is such a lack of willingness for people to accept responsibility because they want to fucking blame the TV, they want to blame the device, they want to blame social media. No one wants to accept and take account for how those behaviours came into effect. And so for me, I think if we want to essentially witness change, one of the greatest ways that we can witness change is by becoming an exceptional parent, because we get to see the product of, like when I found out my first son was coming, like I literally fucking lost my shit. Like I was jumping up and down because, please hear me out before you judge me. I love working with people because I love to see change. But one of the things that got me into working with people is I love to train dogs. Love working with dogs. I love working with horses. I dated a horse whisperer's daughter, Pat Pirelli, for like 3 years, and so I got to learn how to work energetically with horses. I've worked with, Caesar Milan. I love training animals. And when I had this little animal, my own animal, I was like, oh my God, I get to train this one. And I know how that sounds. And I'm fucking okay with it because I have a really good boy. But here's the thing. How do you know a responsible pet owner? Because their pet knows how to fucking behave. And I actually don't care how they sound. Because people can blame that there are certain things that kids can have which can amplify aspects of their personality. That I get. I'm ASD, ADHD, OCD, dyslexic. As I said, I've got more acronyms than most people. So I understand what it's like to be neurodiverse and grow up with the challenges of being neurodiverse and what that means. But I also had, for the most part, a really good mum who parented me, with a lot of discipline and a lot of dysfunction. But for the most part, she did a pretty good job. And I feel like as a result of that, I came out okay. But I now look at people who aren't willing to take responsibility for the behaviours that they're seeing coming from their kids. And I also have the great pleasure of working with some incredible developmental psychologists. One of them is Dr. Shafali, Dr. Vanessa Lapointe. And what's interesting is when I talk to these incredible women and we talk about working with kids, it's always about working with the parent. And Caesar Milan says it best. He says, I don't train dogs. He says, I rehabilitate dogs and I train the owners. And I put those words into Shafali's and into Dr. Vanessa's mouths, where they don't work with kids, they rehabilitate the kids and they work on the parents. Because the kids are nothing more than an expression, in most cases, either of an emotion or a behaviour that is being repressed by an adult figure in the household. I don't know where we went with that one, but...
We're just getting
excited.
started.
What am I excited about? I'm excited about seeing change. I'm excited about being a dad. I'm looking forward to being a dad second time round. It's in a very different scenario, but I'm really looking forward to, doing it all again. I just love being a dad. If I could have my way, I'd have like 100 kids and no wives.
Thank you so much for coming.
Mate.
Fuck,
we're going to end on that.
So grateful.